I love you, Tiki, and I kind of like Sean, and I like my friends who are Giant fans. I respect all of you. If I had to vote on those three fork-in-the-roll options and say, where do I think this goes, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. I think it goes to a dark, ugly place. You lose to the Raiders, and we're headed towards a 3-win season. How you doing, Tiki?
I'm doing fantastic, but why are you going to start a football Friday that way, Ev? I mean, come on. Look, we know what's going on here. We know what's at stake for this New York Giants team. And I think for the first time, I feel like Coach Dable is not in a position of control. You know what I mean? So there was a time back when he first got the job a year and a half ago where we didn't know what to expect from Dabes. And then very quickly, he showed us, right? He's going to be a risk taker. He's going to have this team highly prepared. They are going to talk about accountability. They're going to play with accountability. They're going to win close games. And the narrative was going to be exactly that. And then at the beginning of this season, things started to twist and turn, and like that solid foundation just started to lose itself a little bit. And now, I think you talk about the fork of the road for the New York Giants. To me, this is really the fork in the road for Brian Dable.
Yes.
Right? We need to know who he actually is. Not the guy who was confused about, at least he acted like he was confused about the Daniel Jones situation, who wasn't aware that his kicker was banged up and was not actually all right. As we saw in the pregame, which I didn't see, but we know from reports he was not good, and he chose to go for it, field goals as opposed to going for it on 4th and 1. Like, Brian Dable had a solid, we had an understanding of who he was. Now we're waffling a little bit, and it's not anybody's fault except for his. So to me, this game is less about where are the Giants going this season. I think we kind of feel that it's lost in some regards. It's more about who is this head coach and what can we expect from him going forward. I hope it's what we saw last year, but I think this game starts defining that in a much clearer way than we ever had before.
I agree, and I think those two things are related, because if the Giants win this game and don't go on some kind of miraculous run, because I think the majority of Giant fans don't expect that to happen. Maybe they'll beat the Raiders on Sunday, but they're not necessarily going to go to Dallas and beat the Cowboys, get to 4-6, and all of a sudden make things interesting. But if they beat the Raiders and this turns into a 6-win season, a 7-win season, I think that we look at this past year and say, yeah, there was a lot of bad breaks. There were a lot of injuries. It sucks. We move on to year 3. But if you lose a game to a football team that's dysfunctional, a football team that decided in the middle of their year, let's fire the head coach, let's fire the general manager, and you lose this game coming off of the brutal way you lost to the New York Jets. Blame the refs, blame the coach, blame the kicker, blame whatever you want. You can't lose that game the way they did. And you combine that with the way they lost to Buffalo, and now all of a sudden you lose to Vegas, and this season spirals in that way that I fear, and we're looking at a 4-win season, then everything you just said about this head coach is questioned. Everything about this franchise's direction is questioned. That's why losing this game could kind of lead you into the road of despair, the road of kind of familiar territory like we've seen the last few years with Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo and Joe Judge.
Yeah.
And that's the fear of what a loss to this Raider team on Sunday could do for the rest of the year.
It does. And, it's funny because there are a couple of ways to think about the season. And you think about the big picture, and you lament the missed opportunities earlier in the year. You think about the opportunities that still lie ahead of this year. But to me, the Giants season from the very beginning has been too big picture too often. It's right. You get beat by the Dallas Cowboys, blown out on opening day. Oh, the season's ruined. Look how bad this offensive line is. And it just you create these massive narratives, and not enough of the focus has been on what do we need to do to get better every day, and what do we need to correct and be precise on Sundays. And so, and I think that's everybody, by the way. I think that's Saquon thinking about his contract. I think that's Daniel Jones trying to live up to the contract. I think that's the fan and the organization expectation after winning 10 games, including that playoff game on the road. I think it's all been too big picture. And it's lost sight of what made the Giants really good last year, which was myopic focus on Sunday, like this Sunday. And so when I talk about this being a narrative or a conversation about who Brian Daboll is, it's that. Like, I want to see him so dialed in on Sunday on what he has to do to beat the Raiders, the advantages that he, as the reigning coach of the year, have on Antonio Pierce, who's never had a head coaching situation other than in high school. Right, those things matter. And you have to find the individual ways to beat the opponent, not think about the big picture. So stop talking about the big picture.
Okay.
Because the only thing that matters is beating the
100%.
The Las Vegas Raiders, period.
I agree. And if you beat the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday, the Giant fan goes to work on Monday with a glimmer of hope. With a glimmer of hope. A hope of, hey, if we can beat the Cowboys, we're 4-6. And then we got Washington and New England. But here's why I don't have faith.
Stop. If you beat the Raiders, and I don't even want to say it because it's contradicting what I'm saying now.
I know.
Right? But if you do beat the Raiders, the only thing that matters is the Cowboys.
Okay.
It's going down to Big D and embarrassing them. How do you beat Dak Prescott? How do you handle CeeDee Lamb, who's going to line a lot more up at X and be a bigger downfield threat than he's been so far this season? Like, that's what's got to matter. It's individual games.
Okay.
Let's get to the quarter point. Let's get to the halfway point.
Then let's focus on Sunday, and I'll tell you why I don't have confidence. And it's not to be a hater. I'm not a hater. I don't think I've ever been a hater in the many years I've been here. But I'll tell you what scares me. Ever hear that phrase, when it rains, it pours? Mm-hmm. This season is the definition of when it rains, it pours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is
the Murphy's Law season.
This is the Murphy's Law season. Everything that could go wrong for this football team has gone wrong. When they've had chances to win games, to stunningly win games, like they did 3 weeks ago on Sunday night against the Buffalo Bills, they find a way to lose. When they play a game against the New York Jets, despite not having a quarterback they allowed to throw the football in the second half, they found ways. We can blame the officials all we want. They still found ways to somehow lose to Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. So when I look at Sunday against the Raiders, and there's hope. Daniel Jones is back, and that's great. And Saquon Barkley is going to be right next to him, which is great. First time we've seen that since the second week of the season. And Andrew Thomas is trending in the right direction. Andrew Thomas said earlier today, I think I'm going to play. In fact, the quote was, there's a good chance I'm going to play on Sunday. That's great. But now all of a sudden, we need to see a Giant offense that has done absolutely nothing outside of a half in Arizona. We need to see a Giant offense click. We need to see a quarterback in Daniel Jones actually get through a full game now. Because, yes, he's back from this neck issue. When he takes that first hit, when Max Crosby nails him, what happens? I hope he gets up and he's fine. I'm certainly not rooting for an injury, but it's got to be in the back of your mind. Plus, I also wonder, and I don't care what Mike Kafka says or Brian Daboll says, I wonder, T, can you tell me if this is a fair worry? That because he's coming off of a neck injury, they may not want to expose Daniel Jones as often as they have in the past at running the football. Well, that's a big part of his game.
Yeah,
if you're taking that away from him, who's Daniel Jones? So there's a lot of things that worry me. Plus, we always talk about, Antonio Pierce, like, what does he know about being an NFL head coach? We saw last year Jeff Saturday win his one game in the first game that he coached.
Yeah.
I wonder if there, oddly, is a disadvantage to a team facing a team where now you have no idea what to expect because there's a new offensive coordinator, there's a new head coach, there's a new quarterback. Maybe in a weird way that gives the Raiders the advantage. So my Murphy's Law, when it rains theory, is that Sunday in Vegas, it's going to pour again, and the Giants are going to find a way to lose.
Well, I don't think so. And I'm not even going to predict it. I'm just going to say that the advantages, as you lay them out, to me, clearly favor the New York Giants, and it's three reasons. One, you talk about the head coach. Dabes knows how to do this. Antonio Pierce is doing it with emotion. Like what he said on his introductory press conference for his interim basis was awesome, right? It would get you motivated. But that motivation, it only lasts for so long. Eventually, you got to go out and have the decisions in game that help you win football games. And maybe he makes them, maybe he does. I don't know. But I know that Coach Dabes has done this before. The other thing is the Aiden O'Connell situation. Aiden O'Connell is going to get dogged and blitzed and confused by Wink more than we probably saw Sam Howell get dogged and blitzed and confused by Wink. And I'm not saying that they're going to have 6 sacks in this game and turnovers and whatever it may be, but that this defense, which has been one of the, if not the best defense over the last 3 weeks, at least as far as points are concerned, only 11.5 points per game. They're going to get after Aiden O'Connell and a I guess struggling is the best way to put it, Raiders offense. So I think the advantage, all those things you were talking about, are on the Giants side. It's not on the Raiders side. I mean, maybe emotionally it's on the Raiders side, but I think from the X's and O's and execution standpoint, it's clearly on the Giants side.
Well, now the Giants have to do it. That's the thing. I mean, this is an offense that has done absolutely nothing this season. Nothing. And while Andrew Thomas and Saquon Barkley being back is a huge addition, because all I heard from Sean for weeks and weeks is, if we get those guys back, we'll be fine. Well, now you got them back, or at least it looks like you've got them back. This is an offense that, again, outside of a half against the Arizona Cardinals, has done nothing. So what I wonder about, and we'll find out 425 on Sunday against a Raider defense that has been atrocious stopping the run, so that's certainly an advantage for Saquon, is can this Giant offense actually put it all together? Can Daniel Jones, returning from injury, put it all together? Can they remain relatively healthy? Because they're not fully healthy. Darren Waller's not playing in this game, which I think is a significant blow to this offense. But can the Giants do something that, quite frankly, they haven't done all season long? And that's play 4 good quarters, put points on the board, continue to trust this defense to force turnovers, which they've done a great job of, and win a game on the road. And right now, based on what I've seen for the first 8 weeks of this season, 9 weeks of this season, and what I just saw against the Jets, I shrug my shoulders and say, I'm sorry, I don't believe it.
Yeah, that was a lot of Tommy DeVito, though. So, I mean, you got to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but this offense was limp before that, too. Let's be fair.
Well, I mean, they had a couple of drives. And there wasn't anything to write home about, but they did have a couple of drives. And honestly, you were encouraged by it, right? And it sucked that I'm not talking about necessarily last week against the Jets, but with Tyrod Taylor as a quarterback, they've had a couple of drives, and they've started to show some stability offensive line wise. And Saquon looks like himself, more than he had in so far this year. So I think that there's encouraging signs. There's just not enough of them. I think that's the big issue. There's just not enough of the good that we came to expect from this Giants team.
Remember when you said about 5 minutes ago, we got to look at it one game at a time.
Yes.
You're right about it. But can I delete that for 1 second?
Why?
Which fork down the road do you think occurs? If you had to guess right now, the fork of a playoff run, the fork of this beginning something special with this team finally being healthy, or is it the fork of they're going to win some games, it's probably not going nowhere, or the fork I choose, and I don't want to choose it, it's just how I feel, that this season is going to turn out to just be an unmitigated disaster that's probably going to get worse. Which fork is the answer?
I don't think it's the latter fork.
Okay.
The last one, the one that you think they're going down to because you predicted 6 wins at the beginning of the year. I think it's the middle one. I think they're going to win some games.
Okay.
I think they're going to start getting healthy. They're going to start feeling good about themselves, and they're going to play decent football. It's funny because 2 years ago, before Coach Dabes got the head coaching job, I remember watching or getting ready for the last regular season game of the Joe Judge era, and BT had asked me because we were still Tiki and Tierney. And he's like, "What do you want to see this week?" And I'm like, "A touchdown." It wasn't like I want to win. Oh, I want defense to do this and all. It's like I just want to see a touchdown. And guess what? We didn't get it. Right? So I don't think it's that team. I think this team has so much more upside as long as they start playing competent football, especially on the offensive line, stay healthy at their skill position players, which, Darren Waller's not there anyways. But to me, I think they're primed to start taking little steps. Not huge ones, but little steps. So I think the middle fork of the 3 that you laid out is what I see. I mean, are they making a playoff run? It's improbable. I mean, the Detroit Lions did it. But the Detroit Lions had been building towards that for a couple of years, right? They just weren't quite good enough. They got their roster right, and that's why they're one of the best teams in the AFC now. But they were building towards it. I think the Giants are still in the fit and start stage.
So you choose the middle fork. They'll beat the Raiders. They'll win a couple more games. This season will not go down in history as the unmitigated disaster that some seasons go. I would have predicted that about you. Now, I'm going to predict Sean because Sean is like a typical NFL fan. On Monday, we overreact. And I do the same thing, by the way. I'm not looking down on you when I say this. We go crazy on Monday, overreacting to wins and losses. This is the greatest thing ever. This is like sex. This is the worst thing ever. I hate football. I hate my life. But then by Friday, we talk ourselves into why things are going to be okay. So my prediction is that Sean will believe they'll beat the Raiders on Sunday and believe this is the beginning of the run that gets him into a playoff race.
I want to believe that. And I still believe ultimately the fate of the season will be this team will finish one game out of a playoff spot, and we will rule that. So if that means that it's fork number 1 or 3 or however you're labeling us, that's
fork
fine.
number 1. That means you're in a playoff race.
I believe we'll be in a playoff race. I will be full blown. We're going to the playoffs in another week if it's the Cowboy game. That's the thing. It's a start and stop. I hate that the Cowboy game is following this Raider game, and I know that's all we have to focus on is this Raider game.
I say this as a man with a lot of experience watching crappy seasons. You have to admit, if there's anything I have a lot of experience in as a fan, it's watching disasters.
I'm a loser.
Like, I have seen so many disasters in my lifetime, and they start off, Tiki, in such unique ways. They don't all start the same way. So as an expert on disasters, I say this with as much peace and love as I could possibly find. I've identified this season as a full-blown disaster.
But
I've
you can
seen it
save,
before.
But you can rebuild.
Okay? I'm just letting you know that I've seen hell, okay?
Evan,
I've seen it many times, and I'm watching it again, and I'm just trying to be nice by warning you about it.
This is called projection. You're taking your past experiences,
That's right.
your negativity, your trauma, and you're throwing it upon us. That's what you're doing. This is jet projection.
No, it's not.
Not your son. I'm talking about New York Jets.
Tiki, can I correct you? It's
projection.
It's not jet projections. It's jet net projections. Because all three have done it. Let me tell you. We'll get your calls on the New York Football Giants facing a fork in the road situation Sunday in Las Vegas, coming up at 877-337-6666. We also have a health update. Who's kicking the football if the Giants need to attempt a game-winning 45-yard field goal?